Hey guys, welcome back to The Break. We are joined here today with two of my favorite people, Nick Afka Thomas and Sarah Ann Masse. They are part of the comedic duo Thomasse. You guys can check them out. I want to let you give a little bit more of an intro and maybe like a quick social link in the beginning so somebody can check you out.
Our comedy duo is We Are Thomasse, and we put out a new video every week online. You can find us on Facebook. That's our primary audience. And we also perform live here in LA every month at Second City.
Perfect.
I agree.
Yeah. So
These are true facts.
When
This is going to be good.
we saw you guys a few weeks back in downtown, and I was in stitches. When did you guys come out here?
We
To Los
moved
Angeles.
to LA just over 3 years ago from
Okay.
New York.
February 2016.
No way.
There you
Wow.
go. I can do math.
Yeah,
Perfect.
a few years back.
Yeah.
So you were both from the East Coast. Well, I'm guessing from your accent.
I'm
no.
so East Coast.
So East-
I could barely. I know. Actually, that's the thing. Sometimes I'm inclined to go around pretending that I'm just from such a wealthy, posh U.S. family that I was given speech elocution lessons, and I always speak like this.
Perfect.
But no, I'm that East. I'm from the UK.
Yeah.
So did you guys train over in New York or?
Yeah,
how did
so
that
a
work?
combination. Nick obviously started his training in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
He went to drama school, did some acting and comedy in London, right?
All of this is true.
And then I started acting as a teenager in Connecticut and New York, and I did a lot of sort of like classic theater training, musical theater, all of that stuff. And then in my late teens, early 20s, I sort of discovered improv. And then when I lived in London, I did a musical improv. I was on a team there. And then Nick and I started doing improv together, actually in LA,
Bizarrely.
but 8 years ago.
Wow.
So we did try LA once before. It didn't stick.
Yeah.
But it did kind of help start our...
The traffic drove you guys away, or?
Well, we didn't have a reason to
Help.
be here. There was no real reason to be here. And I think that's a huge part of it. Like, if you have a reason to be in a place, then you feel a lot more motivated. You feel like you want to create a community and really have that drive. And we just didn't have it at that time. So we gave it a shot for 5 months and then moved back to the East Coast. Did a lot of comedy there.
True. We continued our training at UCB, and then we had a great improv team called Macwood Fleet.
Okay. I like the play on words.
We love that name. It was a wonderful team. We won a competition, didn't we?
Yeah, we won a huge improv competition. We beat our coach's team,
Oh,
which was
yes.
a huge win for us. And he felt proud too. And it was a really funny group of people. One of them was Evan Gregory from the Gregory Brothers, who do like the Auto-Tune the News.
Yeah.
And so they were sort of our first example of really successful viral comedy online. We had direct experience with someone who was sort of living that life. And while working with them, we started doing some sketches that we had written. And that was sort of our dipping our toe into moving into sketch territory, which is now what we're known for.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I know Alex and I both actually were on the East Coast as well, and when our business kind of started taking better shape, we moved out here because of different opportunities. Most of our meetings were out here with different investors and things like that. So it made more sense to be located here. What was that kind of mindset for you guys to finally make the switch, even though you gave it a shot for 5 months?
Well, what was funny is when we first got married, we were totally broke. And we had been living in LA, got married on the East Coast, we're traveling back and forth. And so after deciding to leave LA, we were like, right, we're moving back to the East Coast. We'll stay with my parents in Connecticut for a few months while we find a place in New York. But it turned into 3.5 years living in Connecticut with my parents, which luckily for us, we get along with them very
great.
well. and part of the reason we were broke is like we had this wedding. Nick wasn't allowed to work for 6 months because he was from the UK. And so we had to sort of rebuild our lives from the ground up. And being with my parents allowed us to do that. And during that time, we were taking classes at UCB and really sort of growing our comedy. So we finally, Nick booked a commercial and had been doing, his day job is as a tutor. So he'd been doing a lot of tutoring work, booked this commercial, and we finally had enough money to move to New York. So we moved to New York, we get into a comedy festival, and we're like, oh, we have to write a show now. So we wrote the show, and it went over really well. The theater there, the People's Improv Theater, offered us a monthly slot. We went and did a festival down in North
It
Carolina.
was North Carolina. It's Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
And there was a scout from a comedy theater here in LA called Io West, which is now defunct, but she saw us and said, you have to do this comedy festival in LA. And Nick was like, no, we can't afford to go to LA. What are you, crazy? I was
Just
like,
came back.
It cost $25 to apply. Let's just apply and see what happens.
Yeah.
Sure enough, we get into the festival. So we figure out a way to afford it. We go to LA, we set up meetings, we do our show at the festival, and they're like, hey, do you want an extra show? We'll give you a main stage show. And anytime you're in LA, you can perform on the main stage. And so we ended up this was 2015. We ended up going to LA 4 times.
Wow.
Signed with a manager who was based in LA. And it just felt like the momentum's there. You know, the work is here. There is obviously work in film and television in New York as well, but it's not the same. So your odds are better here. And we felt like we had more opportunity awaiting us in LA. So we decided to make the jump, move to LA in a sublet. We're like, we're not committing fully. We're going to keep our New York apartment. And we finally bit the bullet and signed a lease.
I always joke around, especially with Frank, about kind of this new way of thinking here versus New York. I think whenever you go approach, let's say you go out to a bar in New York, you basically get approached and say, where do you work? That's typically the question. Whereas out here, every time that we've been out, or again, just kind of dealing with people, it's, what are you working on? And I think that mentality of a switch between New York and here in just California in general, it's a lot more creative driven here than it is maybe in New York. And I think it's...
I gotta say, I feel like, I don't know why, but I feel like weird things, wonderful things, magic things do happen in Southern California.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why, but awesome, weird, bizarre, life-changing things happen out here.
Yeah, and it was a sort of a mindset shift for me because I grew up on the East Coast. I loved New York. I lived in New York for a really long time before I met Nick. And
there's a time before that.
I know. Can you imagine?
I know.
And I was very much originally sort of like, I want to do Broadway. I'm going to do musical theater. And then I decided to try to shift to film and television. And at that time, I unfortunately had a really bad situation happen in the entertainment industry that sort of put me off of that for a long time. So when it came time for us to start working together and I felt like that new drive and new safety in the industry and like I could create my own work, I had to get my head around the idea of LA because I always thought, I'll never move to LA. I once said to Nick, where can we live that's warm all year round and actually has like a film and television scene? And he started to open his mouth.
But they also speak English.
But they speak English
because we
unlike Nick or my brother, I do not speak more than one language, unfortunately. He started to open his mouth and I went, do not say LA. I was just like so set against it. But it's great. It really is. It has this energy and it feels weirdly more collaborative. And there's this theory that years ago, New York started getting really expensive and artists started moving out of New York and into LA where things were less expensive. And so it sort of injected this sense of like, street artists and writers and all these people moving here. And now obviously LA is super expensive and artists are moving out, but it does have this injection of energy and creativity.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah, for us in particular, I know in the startup world, everybody thinks, San Francisco is obviously the way to go, but the tech boom out here is actually gigantic now. There's so many startups and bigger startups that are thriving out here. But the entertainment business, I mean, this is where you want to be at, obviously.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that was surprised me, Sarah's touched on it, is how supportive this community is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I had the idea, I guess, that which everyone seems to have, which is that the East Coast is, where artists are, and the money isn't as important. What matters is the work, and all that kind of thing. And out here, it's all cutthroat, and everyone's out for themselves, big egos,
Everyone's
that kind
phony,
of thing. Yeah,
right.
And I believe that does exist, but our experience, and I don't think it's just us somehow having some magic touch, but our experience has been that everyone out here has been incredibly supportive and enthusiastic, and people come to see your show a little bit more easily than they do, I think, on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And looking back, I feel like on the East Coast, it's almost like people are having to, wrestle each other in order to get the few opportunities available, or they're much more in their own solitary world. And I've also noticed that there seems to be a tendency for people to find love or partners and move out here where they're more settled down. Yeah. So it feels a little bit more like people are sort of growing into themselves rather than just being all about me.
Right.
Yeah. And it's not a diss on New York. I think part of the reason why it's harder to get people out to shows or things like that is everyone is working so hard. Everyone has their own thing going on.
Yeah.
So it's not even that they don't want to be supportive. It's just they're so driven and there are fewer opportunities and you sort of have to stay hyper-focused. And one producer out here said to me, look, you're from the East Coast. You have this East Coast type A personality. If you get one thing done a day in LA, you'll be ahead of 90% of the people
light
here.
years, yeah.
And so I think it's kind of a great combination. If you have that drive, but you also want a really great quality of life, I feel like LA is a really great place to do that.
And I always say too, so again, kind of more towards the startup realm, when we're out in New York, a lot of the questions from investors or said people are, how much money are you guys making per month? How many users do you guys have? What's the next step? Give us the next 3 to 6 months. Whereas out here, it's awesome idea. How are you guys going to go about and get some users, or how are you guys going to go to market? And it's more kind of bigger, higher level thinking. So again, just kind of a switch of the different coasts.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I think we feel, at least I feel a lot more at home or just more creatively driven out here as opposed to back in the cold
Agreed.
East. But this actually is a good segue you were talking about. What I wanted to get into is, for us, it's very important for us to grow a community of users, a group of people that get excited about our product and vision and things like that. For you guys, for artists in general, building an audience is gigantic. How do you go about doing that? What platforms are you most active on? What has worked for you guys so far?
Well, I think the answer is going to be slightly frustrating, because the truth of the matter is there's no real formula and there's no real path. Everyone has a very different experience. I think the biggest thing for us is just creating work that we actually are excited by and believe in. We're never trying to pander to a specific audience. We're putting the work out there, and the audience that responds to it will come to us or stick with us. And so for us, I mean, sort of the literal journey of it was, I mentioned we signed with a manager several years ago. We're no longer with him, but he said to us, your stuff is great, but you only have 3 sketches online.
Yeah.
You need to film more. And I had run a theater company for 4 years in New York, so I sort of put my producer hat on and went, right, we have to film more. So we went back to New York, and I reached out to some communities that we're in. Like, I'm on an all-female listserv, essentially, and I said, here's the deal, here's what we do. We're looking for people who can shoot with us. We have no budget. And someone wrote back and said, hey, I'm a producer and my husband's a director, and we're looking to build our reel. Let's shoot some stuff together. It was a couple named Zoe and Mark, and we ended up shooting for 6 months, basically. Wow. And we shot, I think, about 24 videos in 6 months. And I created a plan, which was we would roll stuff out every other week. So we had a huge backlog of content.
That's great.
Which was a lifesaver, because when you're putting material out that frequently, you can get burnt out so easily. So we started releasing sort of right before we moved to LA, I think. And within 3 days of moving to LA, one of the first videos we put out got featured by Funny or Die.
Perfect.
Which was amazing.
Yeah,
we went to Disneyland, we got featured by Funny or Die. We met Jason Mraz through our friend Billy Galewood, who both became collaborators of ours with our comedy. And so it was like an amazing first week in LA.
Love LA.
We've made it. It's
Magical
amazing.
things happen in LA.
So Funny or Die was really instrumental, because they started promoting our stuff. And our first thing to sort of go viral was a series called Feminist Fairy Tales. And it got over 1 million views on Funny or Die. It became eternal, right? So it had like an 80% funny rating with over 100,000. Like, it was great. It was amazing. And then a few months after that, we had been releasing on Funny or Die and YouTube, and then a little later, Facebook. And right before the 4th of July, we were talking, because we're obviously a British-American couple. So we were talking in our kitchen. We're like, oh, we should really be doing a 4th of July video. This is stupid. And it was like 10 days before.
Wow.
And we were kind of trying to figure out an idea. And I was looking through a list of ideas. And there was one sentence that Nick had written, which was, Britain comes back to America, and he's like a father figure, and he's saying he really likes what America did with the place, knocked down a few walls. I went, oh, that's a good idea, but actually, I think it's better if they're exes. And Britain shows up at her birthday party on the 4th of July, and it's this really awkward thing, because that's super relatable, right? We've all had the experience of being with an ex at a party and having to deal with that. So I wrote the first page and a half. Nick wrote the next page and a half. We sort of finished off the last half page together. And I went into like, okay, where are we going to film this? We need all these extras. And we pulled it together, filmed it in a couple of hours, put it out.
Well, first we performed it in our live show.
Oh, yeah.
To
We did
an
a live
audience of
show.
7 people, but it went down an absolute storm.
Yeah.
It was
So it was,
huge.
it was a tiny little show, and we're like, all right, well, they liked it. Hopefully people will watch it. And at this point, we had like 500 followers on our Facebook page. And within 4 days, we got 2.5 million views.
Wow.
It was crazy, and it was completely organic.
What's amazing to hear about this is, again, I know Frank mentioned this, but we came out to your show, what is this now, almost a month ago? And when you guys performed, I remember watching that, and I also remember kind of watching it through Facebook, but it's always nice to know what actually happened, right, to get yourselves there. And you're saying 10 days before, and then you get a huge hit like that. I think it just goes to show that putting in that time and work.
When inspiration hits, pull the damn trigger.
Exactly.
That's it, yeah.
Like, don't let anything hold you back.
One of the things that's been the pattern with us, I mean, part of what you've probably picked up already is that Sarah is a dynamo. When a dynamite, I mean both those words. When it comes to producing things, and so we go, here's something we want to do. Let's do it now. Let's make it happen. And so things happen much faster with Sarah than they would if it was just me. You see, but you're absolutely right. Picking up on that energy and just making it happen now is great, and it does mean, particularly in something like this, that we were putting something out fairly short, not just in time for 4th of July, but it was also 2 weeks after Brexit happened.
Wow.
And since it was between Britain and America, and they were talking about their relationship, there was one point where America turns to Britain and says something about and what's this going on with you in Europe? Remind you of anything? And making some point about the relationship between them, but it brought up Europe, and Britain goes, I don't know how I feel about Europe. Half of me thinks I made a mistake leaving her, and half of me thinks I was never going to be happy. Probably better off alone. And it's all this relationship stuff, but it has that reference to the relationship with Europe and how Britain felt about Europe and the 50-50 split over Brexit. We never mentioned the word Brexit. We never
said the word Brexit.
Yeah. And everybody started referring to it as this Brexit sketch.
The Brexit sketch. I mean, The Guardian covered it and went, there's this amazing Brexit sketch. And we're like,
wow.
Oh, I guess so.
I mean, that's what you lean into, exactly. Yeah.
And I think one of the things for us that we realized is, okay, Facebook is our platform. So let's not abandon the other ones, but let's really pour our energy into Facebook. And one thing we do is we share the content in relevant groups.
Okay.
Which reaches a lot of people who are outside of your immediate audience. And we noticed the shares stopped being visible to us, which meant that they're outside of our sort of contact base. And that's when we thought, something's happening. And it would be 1,000 views every minute. And it was suddenly going crazy. Amazing. And someone reached out to us and said, I'd like to have a meeting with you. I got this email with the link. And it turned out someone who had been in the US government sent the video to 200 people. It was just
I love this.
Crazy. And here's the truth, though. We are we made it. We're there. It happened. But that's not the truth. That's not how it works, right? And
you got to ride the highs,
you have to,
and then you got to keep coming back with more.
I was going to say, I think one of the things about this is that people are consuming material all the time, and you put something out, and you put your heart into it, and you write it, and you film it, and you edit it, and you put it out, and people have seen it, and it's gone. And as far as they're concerned, there's what's next? What else is there? And at this point, we actually thought we had about 60 something videos, but we recently figured out that it's 90.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so I now, over the past 3 years, I think I've produced 96 videos. Wow. And I think 93 of them have been ours. So it's a huge amount of content. And some get 5,000 views, some get 2.5 million views, some get 900 views. It's all over the place. Because the thing is, when you're putting stuff out digitally like that, people might like it, they might share it, they might click like and follow on your page, but they're not necessarily retaining who you are. They're not coming back to your page to visit it every week or every day. And the way Facebook works, they are constantly changing their algorithm. So at first, the algorithm was really friendly to creators and it was getting served to a lot of people. Now what we've found is only between 0.5% and 5% of our audience are seeing any of our posts.
Wow.
And Facebook is aware that this is happening. They're trying to fix the problem. They put us in a beta program for 6 months where they basically gave us some money to upload videos, and they used the data from that to try to fix their algorithm, and it was a really interesting process. So, you can't rely on the platform and the algorithm to always serve you. You have to sort of always be learning on the job.
And I think the one thing that you mentioned about just kind of going out and just creating it, right? Let's say somebody's got an idea or, a business that they want to get into something like that, basically creating the Facebook or YouTube channel or page and just starting because, maybe it starts with 50 views or 90 views and 900, but, there's these off chances, right? That something becomes kind of that spark and really gets kind of viewed.
And I think that there's a tendency to want to wait until everything's right and you've got it just so before you release it and put it out there. But learning on the job, I think, is probably a much smarter way forward, because you're doing something and then that's passed, and then you go on to do the next thing, and you just keep building, and it has that long-term snowball effect. So you want to get that moving sooner rather than later.
Although there have been things that we haven't released. Like, we've filmed things, and if the sound quality isn't good
There's
enough,
an archive.
yeah, it's just like,
yeah.
you know what, we're not going to do it. And
There are things you've not seen.
and we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit, because we started out with really high production values. And so you don't want to shift backwards from that. So that's been a pressure to keep up the production values and make sure that everything looks great. We're lucky to have really excellent crew out here that we work with. But yeah, the thing is, now we're 3 years in, and we just signed with a new manager. And what he said to us is like, you're not new talent. So you're not a development client. But what you are is you're like this secret that other people in the industry don't know about. You have a huge backlog of work that's really high quality and has had a lot of good engagement. So I can take that and use that to make sure that people know who you are and trust you. And we've had meetings with network executives without a manager before we signed with this new manager. We've gotten those meetings all because we have basically a visual resume showing that we know what we're doing. We can do it with no money.
Yeah, the
Imagine what we
traction's
could do if we had money and if we had advertising and we had the backing of a huge...
Well, and it's so funny that you bring that, because I really think that, again, comparing these different worlds, right? Like just in creative in general and building something in general, I think, yes, it's the audience, or it's a user base, or, it's venture capital versus a network. And I really think that, for you guys, right, it's you have the traction, you have these people who are viewing. It's just, how do you get to the next level? And then the same thing goes for when somebody's starting out on a business. It's, maybe they don't have any views or any users, but they have this kind of inkling of, hey, let me go out and start this, in hopes that that will come. But it's always kind of the grass is greener on the other side. And then once you get there, how do you continue going? And having that persistence.
Yeah, and I have a friend who had a web series out on Vimeo, and it didn't have, or YouTube, I can't remember, it didn't have a huge amount of views, but a producer saw it, and she got to write and direct her first feature because of it. So it isn't exclusively about the views and the audience. We're lucky enough to have an audience of about 70K now, and like tens of millions of views across our videos, which is great, and that does help. But if you're doing high quality stuff, if you really believe in your product, whatever it is, whether it's a startup or creative content or whatever, I think that's the biggest part, because your taste level has to be dictating what you're creating. Like I said, don't try to pander to an audience. Create what you're really excited by.
I like how it started and finished that segment on that, right? It's like, look, you have to like what you're doing, and yes, you can go out and get all these views, but you have to like what
because you're going to be doing it a lot, and you're going to be doing it for a long time until it really it bites. And actually, one thing that was coming to my mind as you were speaking there is that although when we have these chats and we sum up what we've done, and there's this great thing and that great thing, and we look back and how many videos have we got, and there's many viewers, and it's great. On a day-to-day basis, it's a slog. It's tough, and there are so many days you're like, oh, what are we doing? Does anyone even care? And then you get a moment where you've changed someone's life, and it's magical, and then then you get an opportunity, and you think something great's happening, but that doesn't work out. But then something else happens, and that's cool. And when you look back, I think it's one of those business graphs where slowly you see the charts work its way upwards, this sort of zigzaggy thing upwards. And if you look back over the period of 3 months or something, you go, oh, we did this, this, and this. That's cool. That's really awesome. It's kind of going in the right direction. But as I say, on a day-to-day basis,
it's a grind. It's such a grind.
It is
and we've
tough.
recently actually gotten a little burnt out. We've been so good about releasing content. And when we got put into that pilot program, it became every week rather than every other week.
So were you in touch with somebody at Facebook? Did they reach out to you?
Facebook found us, and they basically told us we were one of their top independent creators, which we didn't know. We wouldn't know that. And so that was great. And so having to release every week became a bigger grind, and we did it successfully. And then recently, we have this web series that we were releasing every other week, and we got to one episode, and there were some technical issues with the sound, and we realized we had to ADR the entire episode, and that's been taking some time. So we've been releasing live content. So we filmed a lot of our live shows, and I was nervous our fans would be angry at us for not releasing fully filmed, but it's fine. And we do these watch parties now on Facebook, which is great, and a really great way to connect with our audience and give them information about the background of how we came about filming in this location or who the other actors are, and, obviously plugging where they can find more of our stuff. And it's a really great feature. But yeah, there's burnout. I mean, it's a lot of work. And so that's why I keep saying, if you're going to do it, love what you're doing, believe in what you're doing, because it is hard and it is work. And even if you love it, it still feels like work. I know everybody says, like, if you love what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life. I don't think that's true.
No, I know, especially from our side, the ups are amazing and the downs are literally the worst.
Oh, they're heartbreaking.
When we were overseas for a few months working, like, it was probably one of the worst times for us. But it's that kind of dynamic where, for us anyway, I know that there's solo founders. For us, co-founding, I can kind of lean on Alex when I'm down in the dumps, and he can bring me up, and vice versa. So having that relationship is great. But we're more on the friend side. You guys are a couple doing this. I think that's got to be a totally different dynamic, because if you're both feeling like, how do you make that work? Like, when does the work shut off, or how do you boost each other's?
So when does the work what?
I mean, to be really honest, we're terrible at work-life balance.
Yeah,
like, we're really bad at it. I mean, we've taken 2 non-work vacations in the past 5 or 6 years. Oh. They both happened to be within a year of each other. One was for Alex's brother's wedding.
Yes,
in Costa Rica.
That was a lot of fun.
And we got to go for a week in Costa Rica and just, like, hang out and do cool things and zip line and not work, and that was amazing. And then we just took a trip to Vancouver with Nick's parents, which we were like, we're not going to work. We did still work, but it was bare.
Nick came back pretty tan.
Yeah, he came. I know,
I'm British,
and he's British.
Yes.
But we didn't film anything, and we didn't do any live shows. We typically will do one or the other or both when we travel somewhere new. And so we're trying to get better at that balance. And there is, like, Nick still has a day job, and he does tutoring remotely. So he sort of, I mean, I have a day job too. I'm an audiobook narrator, but it's slightly less regular work than what Nick does. But I do the heavy lifting on the production and promotion and making sure all of that's managed. So we do.
And we were still working. And it's just
on the trip, we were still
and it's just, but we didn't do a work trip, It's like it wasn't in order to perform somewhere. It was just to go somewhere. Yes, we continued to work, but one of the things that just occurred to me as well is both those 2 examples you gave involved us have been with family instead of just being with each other. So we actually have not been on a trip, which is just the 2 of us for the sake of going away.
I know, right?
There
Seriously.
being where do you want to go?
Disneyland?
Well, I got this new app.
Yeah, I know. I was like, when do we? I think I'm still on the wait list for Elude. I'm like waiting to get in there.
What we need is something that can take our budget, a small amount of money, and make it actually go a certain distance. But what it is, it eludes me.
No, but really, I think when I would say, like, comparing Frank and I, right? And this is going to be different, I feel like, for everyone, is the way that the relationship actually is. I mean, I know for me, I take things pretty seriously on all cases, so that whether that's a meeting or, this kind of future event that may occur, I'm always very optimistic. And Frank, on the other hand, is very level-headed. He's very straightforward. And I think in general, he grounds me to the point of understanding what my expectations are, but then also realizing that if it doesn't work out, there's other things.
Right.
How do you guys deal with that when it's relationship, business, and kind of all of the above? I believe it must be hard.
It's hard. I think we sort of swap roles a lot of the time when it comes to who's feeling optimistic and who's feeling like they're ready to pound their head into a wall. And there are times where I'll be freaking out about something, and Nick will go, yeah, I'm freaking out about it too. And I go, no, you have to be calm. You have to tell me it's all going to be okay. So it's hard. I think for us, a big part of the challenge too is because we are in we've been married for 8 years. It becomes about other stuff. Like when we're having work-related disagreements, shall we call them? Sometimes it becomes about actually the very nature of who that person is and everything that's wrong with them.
That's a great way to put it.
Our favorite example is we were writing a sketch, I think last year, maybe.
Yeah, it's about a year ago.
And we don't remember what sketch it was. We don't remember what sentence we're talking about now. But one of us was certain that it should be a period as the punctuation. And one of us was certain that it should be a comma as the punctuation, because it would dictate how the actor delivered the line.
And therefore, the quality of the joke and
whether
the
it was funny or
punchline,
not.
whether it's funny or not, and therefore whether you're funny or not.
And whether we should really be working together at all.
And in fact, when it comes down to it, whether or not we should even be in a relationship.
Because of the period.
Yeah.
Because of the period or comma.
And again, a week later, we don't know
No clue.
who was arguing for which.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't actually matter.
Wow.
And that's the thing. I think it is tricky when you combine all of the parts of your life that you're passionate about into one entity. And you have to sort of be cognizant of that and aware of that and sort of give yourself some slack and realize that, actually we're really efficient with our arguments when that happens because we don't have to have two arguments. We just have the one.
Why have two arguments when you can just have one mega argument? But actually, we are terrible. We had a situation a year and a half ago, I think it is now. Because it came up as a memory on Facebook earlier in this year, and it was it happened to be a Saturday, I think it was, and we had a whole load of work to do, but we couldn't face it, and we sat on the sofa and we watched television. And the number of times that I've been on the sofa watching television, I turn to Sarah and go, "This is amazing," just getting to sit on the sofa and watch television do nothing. And then when this Saturday we were just watching something, we started binge watching something. I can't remember what it was. Like, this is great. Is it okay if we just don't do any work today? And we're like, I don't know, that's like really naughty, but and we was like, okay, we didn't do any work today. We just watched television. It's like an 8, and we got takeout or something, and we was like, this is great. And then the next day it's a Sunday, and we have this list of things that we're planning to do and work on. And we're like, can we just have another day like yesterday? And we're like, no, we can't. Can we? Can we? We had, and it was like we watched television and we got takeout and we just like ate and watched our way through.
And then
I
turned to Nick and I went, wait, is this what a weekend feels like?
Ah.
Like, is this what everybody
we had Saturday
does?
and Sunday off.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I think it is bad, quote unquote. We don't sleep a lot. We work really hard. We eat really well and we take good care of our health and things like that. But I think, I hope it's worth the investment of time now. Like, it's worth all the missed weekends. It's worth all the time off because we're doing what we're really passionate about. And I'm also, we've talked about this. I believe in art as activism as well.
I like that.
And I think for me specifically, like I said, I had a bad experience with a really powerful producer early on, and I felt pushed out of the industry. I felt unsafe. And I feel like the art we create now it's funny and it entertains people, but a lot of it also contains messaging. Mm-hmm. And I think when you make people laugh, you break their walls down and people absorb messages more readily than if you're trying to like shove it down their throat or be preachy about it. So that's been important to me. I've also had the opportunity to like mentor other women, teach workshops on production, speak on panels, use my platform to reach people in a different way. So that's another really satisfying part of it and another reason why we're committed to doing it and making sure that it's our voices that are heard and not just sort of going along for the ride.
I think early on, certainly both of us got into this with an intent to entertain people, and because it's fun, it's a positive energy to put out into the world. And of course, the art you create can be positive or negative energy, and we very much try to make positive content that you come out of feeling better for rather than bad in any particular way. I think sometimes early on we were thinking, is this a little bit sort of self-centered that we're doing this work which entertains us or we enjoy? And then once we started reaching a bigger audience, we found that we were really making a difference to people's lives, and that was important. That is important to us, and that was important to us. And I think we've more consciously lent into that with that sense that as we do this more and more, it needs to have some value and actually make a difference as well.
In one of our watch parties a couple of weeks ago, a woman said, I can't remember, someone in their family had died recently, and she joined our watch party and she said, this is the first time I've laughed for weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's stuff like that where it does feel like it's a very narcissistic kind of, the entertainment industry can feel that way, and we're like, well, we could have been lawyers or therapists, and what are we doing? Are we really helping people? But I think we are. We all as consumers understand the importance of entertainment, escapism, and laughing and crying and whatever it is, and art can move us. So we have to remind ourselves not to sound like really like gross about it. But yeah, art is important, and it's okay that we're doing that. It's a talent we have, so we should lean into that and use it in the most positive way we can.
And I think the way that you guys bring it up in terms of like so you guys clearly had said you don't really take that weekend off, but realizing that actually the work that you guys do is someone else's, in essence, kind of escapism or, their weekend of really enjoying themselves and kind of breaking it out. I think a lot of creators in general don't get the, I would say, the full view of like, you're in this day in and day out, and yes, you can post 1 or 2 or 3 or 50 or 90 plus different, pieces of content, but it really is a grind, and you need to basically, sit back up and just keep going.
One of the things that touched me and it really resonated for me was after our second 4th of July sketch, which was again Britain and America, but this time set back in 1776, and it's the day when America hands the Declaration of Independence to
Basically
Britain.
serving him divorce papers.
Right, saying that's it, our relationship is done. It's like, what?
And that one got over 1 million views in 24 hours.
Yeah,
That was
which
awesome.
again was insane and it's very exciting and everything. And as a result of this, we get people direct messaging us, and we have a lot of conversations with people directly on social media. And one person started telling me about how when he was a teenager, he was genuinely on the point of committing suicide. And it just so happened that on the television at that time was Carol Burnett. So just playing in the room when he walked into it and being right on the point of doing something to himself. And he said something, a joke or something made him laugh, caught his ear. And he ended up watching the rest of the show. And by the time the show finished, 10, 12 minutes later, he'd laughed so much, he'd enjoyed it. So he gave him hope again. Mm-hmm. And then the bullet point of this, at the end, he suddenly revealed to me that, he's a grandfather now. He's been married to the same woman for 40 something years. They've had 4 kids, 12 grandchildren, all those people's lives having completely, in effect, been created and literally created actually and saved by Carol Burnett's comedy.
Who is a queen. I love her so much.
But that's sensational. I mean, that shows you at some level how there's so much going on and there's so much negativity and there's so much bad stuff. To remember the joy of life and the happiness in life, and also that there are good things.
Yeah. And Sarah, I think you bring up a good point about burnout just in general, and clearly, in all, whether it's somebody who's creative or not, when they experience burnout, I think the first thing that somebody thinks of specifically as a creator is, how does this hurt my business? Because, you're constantly going about and doing this. But I think, and this is, definitely something that we've learned as well, is you really do need to take a step back, and whether it's 10 or 12 minutes for a laugh, or, just kind of taking a break in essence, which kind of seems absurd when you're starting a business because it's, you're constantly evolving it. But that actually is helpful because you can come back with new ideas. It's kind of invigorating, if you will, to just kind of spark new inspiration.
Very true.
And it's like I was saying, I was worried our audience would be mad at us for putting out live content. And there's an element of you have to trust your audience. Yeah. You have built a relationship essentially, and our live stuff is also great. It's a different thing. And I realized, we're giving people an opportunity who can't come to see our live shows to see what that's like.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And you guys, you've seen the stuff online and seen it live. It's different.
Yes,
it's a different quality. It sparkles in a different way. And so a couple of weeks in, I went, actually, you know what? This is a cool thing to do. And it's different. And we wouldn't have necessarily started doing this if it hadn't been for the fact that we had burnout and just needed to take a step back, reevaluate, figure out what we're going to shoot next and how we're going to approach it. So
and
I
also
think
work on different projects, because we're releasing we're putting into festivals this short film which is gently humorous, but it's not like comedy.
Very different from the We Are Thomasse stuff. It's called Tristan and Kelly, and it's more of a rom-com or a dramedy. And I wrote it in an hour and a half.
Wow. Basically, I started a lesson. Sarah started writing. I finished the lesson, and Sarah finished a short film. And then she asked me. She asked me to proofread it, make some suggestions, edits, cuts, tighten up a little bit. I looked at it. I remember this specifically. There was half a line I thought was redundant, and I took that out. And other than that, there were a couple of stray adverbs. I thought, wow, we could lose that.
But wait, was it a period or a comma?
It should have been. I am telling you. To this day, no. And the thing is, it was basically came out fully formed, pretty much perfect.
And we shot it in the UK with our friend Toby Sebastian. He stars opposite me. He played Tristan Martell in Game of Thrones, and he's this great actor. And so we shot it, and we spent a lot of time making sure it was really right in post-production. Now we're submitting it to festivals. So that's taken up a lot of my energy. And I produced a short film featuring survivors of sexual violence using Christine Blasey Ford's words and testimony. And I've done all this mentoring and stuff. So it's not like I took time off. It's not like we took time off. It's just we had to focus on other projects. And that's the thing, too. When you establish yourself as one thing, as sketch comedy writers and actors and everything, and you have that responsibility to your audience and you have your release schedule. You have to figure out how to do that, but not let all of the other things and all the other projects that you want to work on fall by the wayside. And so it's a constant learning process, and I think we're managing it pretty well, I hope. But yeah, I mean, that's why I said at the beginning of this conversation, like the answer to how to build and engage audience and all that is a frustrating answer because it is very different for every person. And depending on what kind of content you're putting out. I mean, if you're doing sort of like vlog, direct to camera, play along stuff, I think YouTube is the better platform for that. And it's a different kind of process to building your audience than it is for narrative fiction, which is essentially we're putting out a short film every week, basically.
Right.
And that's
That's huge.
It's huge. It's a big deal.
Work, yeah.
Yeah.
I know we only have actually a couple minutes left. We've been about at the 40 mark, which it seems like we've only been talking for 5, which is crazy. Do you guys just want to plug where somebody can find you if there's any shows coming up or anything like that that you can share with us?
Yeah. So facebook.com/wearetomasse, which is WeAreThomasse. And you can see all of our 90 plus videos there and engage with us. We also have our next live show at Second City Hollywood on June 6th at 9 p.m. And we have a show every month there. So every week, new video, every month, a new show at Second City. And yeah, reach out to us. Also, for other creators who are listening, send us an email. If you have questions, if you want some advice, reach out. It's wearetomasse@gmail.com. We're really easy to get in touch with. And we like to help. We like to sort of mentor in any way that we can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've done as publicity is for a long time now, we've made postcards. So we've, from a photo shoot that we had relatively
I've got one on my fridge.
Yeah.
You have one on your fridge, yeah.
Yay.
So someone told us once that they had one up on their bathroom mirror because
As like an inspiration board kind of
That's
thing.
amazing.
it's
I like
incredible, isn't it? But what we do, because I think might be useful for creators, is we have us on the front and our name, so there's recognition. But then we have stickers on the back. We realized early on that if we make printable stickers,
Actually,
so
that's really brilliant.
what we have we have at the
Okay,
bottom.
let me show it to this camera
Yeah.
here so
Okay.
we can.
What we have at the bottom are some things that we want people to know, which are
Which won't
emails,
change, website, email,
and you
all
can
of
see
that.
all that we're on Facebook and everything. But the sticker at the top there gives you our next shows or whatever message that we're trying to get across at this particular moment in time.
And you can swap that out.
That's
And,
a
yeah.
huge takeaway. So anybody who is like a startup or anything
Yeah.
like that, right? Like clearly these are these things that constantly change, right? Dates or launch
Yep.
parties or anything like that, or events, and
that means we don't have to keep
paying
for
you know, these-
reprinting
Exactly.
something new each time, and it means it doesn't go to waste. We can even actually put stickers on top of the old stickers and that sort of
that's
thing.
true.
Yeah.
So really, the resources don't go to waste in the same way.
And I want to give a shout out to Julia K. Sherman, who shot that photograph. She was working at CBS Radford at the time, so we went there at 6 in the morning, and that was on top of the parking structure.
you guys look great at 6 o'clock in the
Right.
morning.
Well,
And-
also, I want to point out that if you can see this, Sarah is sitting on what you can't tell what it is, but it's actually the wall of the 4th story
Yeah.
car park.
Wow.
So
And
Nick was terrified I was going to fall
so
off
yeah.
the whole
I'm
time.
petrified I'm about to lose my wife in this picture.
I love it.
But
Yeah.
we look
Behind the scenes
awesome.
info.
But
Yeah.
but you bring up a really good point about the email, and I think Frank, if you want to plug also at the end, kind of what we're up to. We've gotten some comments as well about hey, how could I send across some emails or topics that you guys want to discuss. So that's a really good point. But Frank, maybe you want to.
Yeah, so next week I'm not sure if we have something specific locked in. I know that there will be a show on Monday, but with us you can connect with Elude.
Yeah.
No, is that what it is?
No,
I
no,
keep
no,
forgetting.
no,
All right,
no.
what I,
So
oh
it's,
no, connect with the break.
yeah, it's
at
connect with the
gmail.com.
break. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, shoot over any kind of questions and stuff like that. But thank you guys so much for
Yeah.
coming on the show. We
Thanks
really
for
appreciate the
having us.
conversation. We'll have to have another one and
Looking
go a little bit
forward
bigger.
to it.
than
I've
40.
got things to say.
Anytime.
Still,
I love it.
man.
All right, we will see you guys next time.
See it.